Tonight we begin with the development that U.S. intelligence officials, Pentagon strategists, and White House national security advisors had feared, anticipated, and prepared for. A confrontation that unfolded not over weeks or months, but in mere hours. Hours that changed the trajectory of Middle East diplomacy. Hours that put American military assets on high alert across 3 continents. Hours that brought 2 nuclear threshold nations to the edge of direct conflict. What Iranian President Pezeshkian did today crossed a line that the international community had hoped would hold, and when that line broke, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu did not hesitate. They responded with precision, with overwhelming force, and with a message that echoed from Tehran to Washington. President Donald Trump, monitoring the situation from the White House Situation Room, issued an urgent warning that officials describe as among the most direct communications to Iran in decades. What you're about to hear isn't speculation. It isn't analysis based on anonymous sources. It's what we know happened today, and why the next 72 hours may determine whether the Middle East descends into its most significant conflict since 1973. For months now, there had been signals, not from official diplomatic channels, not from formal state communications, just signals that Iran's new government was preparing something unprecedented. President Pezeshkian has been provocative, yes, but he has been calculated in his provocations. His moves have followed a certain logic, a pattern, almost a rhythm that intelligence analysts could track and predict. But what set off alarm bells in Washington, Tel Aviv, and European capitals this week was that the pattern went silent. Intelligence officers who monitor Iranian military communications and diplomatic traffic know the indicators. The encrypted burst transmissions between Tehran and Hezbollah command in Beirut, the movement of Revolutionary Guard Quds Force commanders between Syria and Lebanon, the unusual activity at uranium enrichment facilities in Natanz and Fordo, the sudden cancellation of scheduled diplomatic meetings with European intermediaries, all of that went quiet. And whenever Iran goes quiet, it means something is about to get loud. American satellites detected unusual activity at Parchin Military Complex, a site long suspected of housing Iran's most sensitive weapons development programs. Israeli intelligence, operating through sources deep within the Iranian military establishment, reported that Pezeshkian had held 3 unscheduled meetings with IRGC commanders in the past week alone. These weren't the typical ceremonial briefings that new Iranian presidents receive. These were operational planning sessions focused on what intelligence officials now believe was a coordinated escalation strategy designed to test the resolve of both the Trump administration and the Netanyahu government simultaneously. Early this morning, Israeli military intelligence detected what they described as an unprecedented shift in Iranian force posture, including the activation of long-range missile batteries that had not been deployed to forward positions in over 18 months. These are the kinds of military assets that Iran only deploys when they are signaling something very specific. Imminent retaliation, preemptive strike preparation, or direct confrontation readiness. Western intelligence agencies didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all 3 at once, but what they did know was that Iran was changing its strategic posture. And when a threshold nuclear state shifts posture without explanation, even by small degrees, every intelligence agency on the planet pays attention. Then came the threat. President Pezeshkian, speaking to an assembly of Revolutionary Guard commanders in a speech that was not broadcast publicly but was intercepted by Israeli signals intelligence, made statements that officials describe as shocking in their directness. According to multiple sources with access to the intercepted communications, Pezeshkian declared that Iran would, quote, erase the Zionist entity from the map within the hour if Israel conducted any further strikes on Iranian assets in Syria. He went further. He stated that Iran had developed capabilities that would, quote, reach American bases across the region before their Patriot batteries could warm up. And most alarmingly, he referenced Iran's nuclear program in terms that suggested operational capability rather than research status, a distinction that sent shockwaves through the intelligence community. This wasn't the usual rhetoric. This wasn't the ceremonial threats that Iranian leaders have made for decades. This was specific, this was operational, and this was delivered to the very commanders who would execute such orders. The warning issued by President Trump tonight was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Administration official after National Security Council briefing described Pezeshkian's threat as reckless, destabilizing, and perhaps most importantly, credible enough to warrant immediate military response planning. But strategic ambiguity only works if the target hesitates. Netanyahu did not. In fact, Israel's response today was among the most comprehensive and immediate military actions we've seen in the modern history of the conflict. Here's what we know. Within 4 hours of the intelligence confirming Pezeshkian's threat, Israeli Air Force F-35I Adir stealth fighters were airborne. These weren't the standard patrol missions that Israel conducts daily along its northern border. These were deep penetration strike packages, aircraft configured with precision munitions that Israel only deploys when they are preparing to hit targets inside Iranian territory or Iranian-controlled positions in Syria. The Israeli Defense Forces activated Arrow 3 missile defense batteries along the northern corridor. Naval assets, including missile corvettes equipped with advanced interceptor systems, moved to predetermined defensive positions in the eastern Mediterranean. And most significantly, Israeli military communications went to a level of operational security that analysts say they haven't observed since the 2019 strikes on Iranian militia positions in Iraq. Tonight, Israeli Defense Forces confirmed that the Air Force launched coordinated strikes on 17 Iranian military positions in Syria, including a weapons storage facility near Damascus that had recently been upgraded to house what analysts believe was advanced missile guidance systems transferred from Tehran. Israel struck before Iran could activate those systems. They hit the command center coordinating Iranian drone operations over the Golan Heights. They hit the communications relay linking Quds force commanders in Syria to their headquarters in Tehran. They hit convoy staging areas that were likely preparing to move additional weapon systems to Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon. In other words, Israel targeted the nervous system of Iranian military operations in the Levant, the infrastructure that would have made Pezeshkian's threat operational. This is what made Trump's warning so urgent. Pezeshkian's threat wasn't just symbolic, it was actionable. It represented the kind of escalation that could trigger a regional war involving American forces if left unchecked. And Israel, understanding that fully, responded with force. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't strike population centers. They didn't target Iranian diplomatic facilities. They hit military command nodes. They hit weapons caches. They hit the operational capability that Iran would need to execute the very threats Pezeshkian had made hours earlier. President Trump, speaking to reporters aboard Air Force One, stated, "What Iran did today was cross every red line we've established. President Pezeshkian made a serious mistake. And Prime Minister Netanyahu responded exactly as I would expect a strong leader to respond. America stands with Israel completely and totally." And here's where the story becomes even more alarming. Intelligence analysts now believe that Pezeshkian's threat was designed to test the cohesion of the American-Israeli alliance after months of diplomatic tensions over regional strategy. Iran wanted to see whether Washington would restrain Jerusalem in the face of direct provocation. But instead, the opposite happened. The Trump administration didn't urge restraint. They issued a warning so direct, so unambiguous that even Tehran's hardliners noticed, you don't get Iran's attention easily. But today, Trump and Netanyahu did. Senior Pentagon officials speaking with network correspondents under anonymity described Iran's shift as strategic probing, a way to identify weaknesses in allied coordination before committing to larger operations. But Israel proved today that they remain both capable and willing to act with devastating speed. Their strikes were not only precise, they were timed so accurately that Iranian forces had less than 12 minutes warning before impact. That 12-minute window matters because it shows Israel has penetrated Iran's early warning network. It shows that Netanyahu is not simply reacting to threats, he is anticipating them. Israeli intelligence, according to sources familiar with the operations, had identified the target list within hours of intercepting Pezeshkian's speech. They had pre-positioned assets. They had coordinated with American military commands to ensure deconfliction over Syrian airspace. And they had executed what military planners call a decisive response, one designed not just to neutralize immediate threats, but to send an unmistakable message about future provocations. As reports continued coming in throughout the evening, we learned more about the scale of Israel's response. Israeli Air Force jets carried out over 40 combat sorties, forcing Syrian air defenses offline across multiple provinces. Israeli cyber command units targeted communication nodes that had been upgraded with Russian technical assistance in the last 6 months. Israeli naval forces operating in the eastern Mediterranean reportedly intercepted a vessel carrying components believed to be destined for Iranian weapons facilities in Syria. This wasn't just a strike operation. This wasn't just a message. This was strategic dominance. This was theater-wide coordination. And theater-wide coordination is the one thing Iran has struggled to match since the elimination of Qasem Soleimani in 2020. For every advance Iran has made in embedding forces throughout Syria and Lebanon, Israel has countered with operations that degrade those capabilities faster than Iran can rebuild them. Tonight's action was the most comprehensive example of that counter-strategy we've seen in years, and it happened within hours of Pezeshkian's threat becoming known to Israeli intelligence. That speed matters. It tells Tehran that Israel has the capability to respond before Iranian plans can be executed. It tells Iran's regional proxies that coordination with Tehran provides no protection against Israeli precision. And it tells the international community that the balance of power in the region remains decisively in Israel's favor, regardless of what threats emerge from Tehran. Remember, Iran thought the Trump administration would be cautious after the Afghanistan withdrawal criticism. They thought Israel would be constrained by domestic political divisions. They thought European allies would pressure both Washington and Jerusalem toward diplomacy. They thought wrong, but tonight, the exact opposite is happening. The Trump administration is projecting maximum strength. Israel is demonstrating overwhelming military capability, and European allies, rather than urging restraint, have issued their own condemnations of Pezeshkian's threatening rhetoric. France called the Iranian statement unacceptable and dangerous. Germany described it as a fundamental violation of international norms, and the United Kingdom announced it was reviewing additional sanctions on Iranian military entities. Iran expected division. They received unity. They expected hesitation. They received immediate action. And that miscalculation may prove to be the most consequential error of Pezeshkian's presidency. What makes this moment so dangerous and so unpredictable is that Pezeshkian's threat happened at a time when Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, is under intense domestic pressure. Hardliners want aggressive confrontation with Israel. Moderates want economic relief through renewed nuclear negotiations. The Revolutionary Guard wants expanded regional influence regardless of cost, and ordinary Iranians want an end to the sanctions that have devastated their economy. Khamenei is balancing these demands while managing his own health challenges and succession planning. And when leaders in that position make sudden aggressive moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. Pezeshkian's threat may have been designed to rally domestic support around external confrontation, a classic authoritarian playbook, but the response he received tonight has likely complicated those calculations significantly. Instead of appearing strong, Iran now appears reactive. Instead of intimidating Israel, they've demonstrated that their threats trigger immediate degradation of their military capabilities, and instead of dividing the American-Israeli alliance, they've reinforced it. President Trump's warning, now distributed through every diplomatic channel available to the State Department, was designed to signal that America is not willing to tolerate direct threats against its closest Middle East ally. Administration officials said plainly that Pezeshkian's statement was inconsistent with the behavior of a responsible regional actor seeking peaceful resolution of disputes. That is diplomatic language for, you've crossed a line and there will be consequences. You don't usually hear that tone from the White House unless something serious is at stake. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, speaking at a hastily arranged press briefing, stated, "The United States will not stand by while Iran threatens our allies with annihilation. President Pezeshkian should understand that words have consequences and that America's commitment to Israeli security is absolute." Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth confirmed that American military assets in the region have been placed on heightened readiness status. The USS Eisenhower Carrier Strike Group has altered its patrol pattern to move closer to the eastern Mediterranean, and additional air defense assets have been forward deployed to positions in Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the Israeli Knesset in an emergency session tonight, a direct, forceful speech that left no room for misinterpretation. He said, "Iran's president spoke today of erasing Israel from the map. He should know that those who threaten to destroy us will find themselves destroyed. He said, "We have proven tonight that Israeli intelligence sees everything. Israeli reach extends everywhere, and Israeli resolve knows no limits." And he said, "To the people of Israel, I say this: sleep safely tonight. Your military has acted, and your enemies have received their answer." These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from a leader who understands just how high the stakes have become, and who has chosen to meet threat with action rather than words with words. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Pezeshkian's threat wasn't isolated. Along with the Iranian president's statements, Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem also issued threatening rhetoric toward Israeli population centers. Houthi forces in Yemen increased drone and missile attacks targeting Red Sea shipping lanes. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq launched rocket attacks against American positions near Erbil. All of this happened within the same 48-hour period. When Iran moves multiple pieces at once, it means something larger is underway. Intelligence officials are now assessing whether today's events represent the beginning of a coordinated pressure campaign designed to overwhelm Israeli and American response capabilities, or whether Iran is escalating toward a more direct confrontation. Neither option is reassuring. Both require continued vigilance. And both suggest that the next few days will be critical in determining whether this confrontation escalates or de-escalates. Intelligence analysts are now considering several possibilities. One is that Iran is preparing a direct military response to Israel's strikes tonight, an escalation that could trigger full-scale regional conflict. Another is that Iran is attempting to create enough chaos to extract concessions from the international community, using the threat of wider war as leverage. A third possibility, the one worrying officials the most, is that Iran is attempting to establish a new normal of aggressive rhetoric and coordinated proxy attacks that gradually shifts the balance of power in their favor. But today, Netanyahu took that card off the table. Israel didn't wait for international mediation. They didn't request UN Security Council meetings. They didn't rely on diplomatic pressure. They struck. And they struck in a way that degraded Iranian capabilities while demonstrating that Israel maintains escalation dominance in any conflict scenario. What we're watching now is a test of resolve. Iran wants to see whether sustained pressure can crack the American-Israeli alliance. Israel wants to show that threats trigger consequences, not negotiations. The Trump administration wants to prevent regional war while maintaining credible deterrence. And European allies want to prevent escalation while avoiding the collapse of remaining diplomatic channels. These objectives don't align perfectly, and that misalignment is exactly what Iran hopes to exploit. But tonight's coordinated response, Trump's urgent warning combined with Netanyahu's military action, suggests that the alliance is holding stronger than Tehran anticipated. Tonight, we've heard from intelligence officials who are now monitoring Iranian military communications in real time. They say Iranian commanders are conducting damage assessments across all 17 strike locations. They say Revolutionary Guard leadership has gone to emergency communication protocols, suggesting they fear further Israeli action, and they say Pezeshkian's decision to issue such a direct threat is likely part of a broader strategy to rally domestic support, but one that has badly backfired in its first hours. But Iran is not backing down publicly. In fact, Iranian state media is describing tonight's events as proof of Zionist aggression and promising unspecified retaliation. Israel's response, swift, comprehensive, and devastating, sent a message to Tehran that threats will be met with action, and it sent a message to Washington that Jerusalem remains a capable and willing partner in regional security. As the night progresses, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly Iran hoped to achieve with Pezeshkian's threat. But what we do know is that Trump's warning was timely. It reinforced American commitment to Israeli security. It signaled to regional allies that Washington will not tolerate direct threats. And it demonstrated that the Trump administration is prepared to support decisive Israeli action when circumstances require it. What happens next will depend on what Iran does in the next 72 hours. If they de-escalate, this moment will be remembered as a successful demonstration of deterrence. If they escalate, Israel and America have already shown they are prepared for that scenario. They have shown they are coordinated. They have shown they are capable. And they have shown they are ready to respond with overwhelming force if necessary. And tonight, for the first time in months, Tehran appears to be reassessing. The Iranian capital is quiet, too quiet. And when Iran is quiet, it means they are calculating. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, Iran learned something they should have remembered. Threats against Israel trigger immediate military consequences. American support for Israeli security is not rhetorical, and the alliance between Washington and Jerusalem is stronger than any pressure Tehran can apply. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. Israel will not be intimidated by threats. America will not abandon its allies. And Iran's strategy of aggressive rhetoric has met its match. And we will be here, watching every detail as the next phase of this critical confrontation unfolds.